cluster down here. And this section is really about reflecting on the past, which we did this morning, building on that and looking at the future and how we can shape MIQ going forward. So MIQ, obviously, as you're aware, there's multiple agencies involved in the system. We've heard over the last 1.5 days about some of the experiences, some of the science that has led to where we are today. Our keynote speakers yesterday, there was a common theme that I picked up, I think they all said it in some form, was good science and courageous leadership or courageous political leadership leads to great outcomes. And I think they're part right. I think the part that's missing is you need good science, courageous political leadership, and you need a committed workforce and a unified workforce of people that want to work together and find a way to get things done. And I think that's what we've got, and we've come a long way, and now it's a chance to actually build on that and improve that. And the word that came through before in our session was tautanga, and I think that is a very good word to use about to explain how we need to continue to work together. But look, this section is about a little more background about the agencies that are involved. So I know there are lots of different agencies, there are a lot of partners, there are a lot of private sector groups. What I've done is I've pulled out a few different organisations and asked them if they can come up and talk a little bit about their experience, their agency, their experience, and any insights that they've got. So it's sort of a MIQ speed dating session. And first up in alphabetical order is we've got ASEC, we've got Murray Breeze from ASEC. Murray's been involved for a long time, and ASEC has certainly been in the team right from day one and provided some valuable services. So I'll just hand over to Murray and for a couple of minutes he'll tell us about himself and why he makes a good partner.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Gavin. I'm not sure I'm Miller on some of those plans. Anyway, thanks very much, Lee, and putting this one together. I'm not really with the whole thing this morning. So ASEC's been involved in the MIF operation pretty much right from the start, I understand. I came on board in around about July last year. At the moment, we have 156 staff tied up in the MIF operation, which is around about 30% of the MIF workforce. And we're based in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. All of my team are volunteers. When I came in, we transitioned away from the stations, the airport stations, flying staff to looking for volunteers, and that's worked out really well for us. We have a small management team of 4. Steve Weeks, who's National Ops Manager, and also looks after Christchurch and Wellington teams. And Sarah Crawley Allen in Auckland, who looks after the 93 staff in Auckland. Our role around this now is very much focused on being part of the integrated security workforce within the MIF operation. And with the MB security workforce coming on board, our expectation is that they'll work with those staff members and help them come up to speed as quickly as possible. We also have provided payroll and rostering services to MB as part of that security workforce that they're pulling together. Looking forward, I'm really looking forward to perhaps the initiatives that come out of this meeting over the last couple of days and being able to contribute to that and working as close as I can with the agencies here to put us on a better footing for the future, because obviously the future is going to go on for a few years yet. There's been some really good initiatives suggested over the last couple of days, and I'll look forward to those being captured and I need to get showing with them. So thanks again. It's been a great opportunity to come along and listen to all the people that have presented here. It's been very valuable. Thank you.
Thanks, Murray, and your phone number will be up on the board at the back. Next up, to represent the hotel group, I've invited Nicole Wilson from the Jet Park Hotel Group, and if you could come talk to us a little bit about her role and some insights from the hotel sector.
Thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say again, feel incredibly proud to be part of a joint organisation like this. So collectively, we'll do an amazing job. I represent Jet Park Hotel, so we are 3 hotel groups, pretty small in hotel world, I suppose, but we have Auckland, Hamilton, and Rotorua. Rotorua is our only real hotel now. We refer to real hotels versus fake non-hotel. Yeah, we were stood up on the 23rd of March. I remember the day vividly. We just come from an executive weekend where we were talking about making everybody redundant and shutting our doors. So it was a lifeline. And we're really grateful to be part of this, even though we still, like everybody, have frustrations and not running our normal business. So we're ground zero in Auckland, we're COVID central. I'm often referred to as the queen of COVID, taking away from TV. And yeah, it's been a challenging 12 months. So I think one of the key points for us was we flew under the radar for quite some time, and that was good. No one actually understood the difference actually between quarantine and isolation. And again, I remember the day that Dr. Linwood stood up at the 1 o'clock briefing and said, and the guests the people are being transferred to the Jet Park Hotel quarantine facility. And we were sitting in the ops room and we all just went, oh my God, and freaked out. And from there, the media came to the doors. And they still show that same image of the nurses walking up the stairwell in winter. I think it was May, and we think they need to get some new footage. But yeah, we have a huge crew of people, 200 between our Hamilton and our Auckland teams, and they comprise so many different roles. So I think for everyone here, for hotels, we're not skilled. We don't join a hotel to do this kind of work, and I think that's the thing that's really hard is we've asked our teams of all different divisions to now run a hospital in a lot of countries. And they've done an amazing job. I'm so proud of them. And when they, just like everybody, they've suffered so much scrutiny, so much stigma. They've missed out on so many different events. Their families have given them a lot of grief for working where they work as well, but they still turn up, and they deserve so much more credit. At Jet Park Auckland, we also had to come up with some new teams as well. Because we look after a large group of families, we've now got new family teams, and they're amazing. They grab the children from they grab them, but they organise time to get the returnees, we call them guests, but to some downtime, right? You're in these rooms for a lot of the time, and they take kids out and play with them and just try to normalise these, their time in quarantine. So again, I would not have patience to do that. They're special, really, really special. And then we have a team that sort of sit more with the Defence Force and really look at the inwards and outwards. So they're controlling, when people come in and out. And nobody wants to come to Jet Park Auckland, Good. Yeah, I mean, they're shaking in their boots. And so we're isolated, because I look after both Auckland and Hamilton, they're two very different facilities. Hamilton is the isolation, and David and his team and everyone around them do a fantastic job. They've really gone out of their way to make sure the guests feel special and welcome, and you've heard about that yesterday. But in Auckland, we're already on the back foot. We're as soon as they're in the door, we're trying to let them know that they will be okay. We're here to look after them. And that's our primary function. Some of the good. Early on, we came up with our own slogan, "Kindness can't be quarantined," and we have that, and that's our philosophy. And we try to put that through everything that we do, every decision we make. We're just like, we're really here to be kind, and I think the staff across all agencies do that there. Another really good thing is a camaraderie against all the agencies. Again, we were so fortunate. We were set up by some amazing women from Ministry of Health, and they came in and scared the life out of us in the first couple of days, but we trusted them and nobody questioned, and they had amazing leadership when we got on board and we did it. We've all had to do some strange things. I've had to don PPE and go and check some people in when you know, that we did have to escort them to a room because there weren't enough people, there weren't enough health staff at the time to do that. And in my head, I was like, I'm not telling my husband what I've just done. They were really early days. One of the really challenging bits was when, you know, so much is done at the podium, as we know, from a political point of view. We're sitting there watching the 1 o'clock and, you know, we were thrown under the bus because apparently we weren't doing the staff testing. We were never told we had to do staff testing. And I think that's the thing, all the staff that work there, they want to do good. They want to help New Zealand keep it safe. So when it's polarised the whole country that they're doing something wrong, they really shattered them. It's horrible. And I know for your own teams that's the same. And so I think that's the thing that the other really challenging thing for hotels is it's our name that's out there. It's the Jet Park, it's the Pullman, it's the Grand Millennium. And that's hard, that's really hard. It's not about pointing fingers and going, hey, well, actually it was their agency. We almost need to get them just to take the hotel out of it. And it's just the managed isolation facility. It's the quarantine facility. Sorry, Terry. At hotels, we don't run the ship. You know, I'm actually I like controlling things. I don't have control anymore, and that's hard. But again, I work in an environment where I can contribute, and that contribution is valued. So that's really appreciated. What's the other good thing? I think one of the good things too is some of the staff have, even though they're not skilled and they weren't trained to do this job, they've actually been upskilled. I mean, fundamentally, our rooms are cleaner than they've ever been before. And think about that next to the same hotel. You know, it's a reality. You know, we wish they were clean, but they're now. All the managed isolation facilities are now cleaner than ever before, and they will be going forward. You know, so that's a real positive. And they've learned. I've learned so much. You know, the staff have learned how to be resilient. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's about it, really. So it's got any questions?
Some questions.
Oh, questions for you. Sorry.
And I think it's important to reflect that it's not just the hotels as well. There's a whole lot of staff sitting underneath that. There are contract cleaners, maintenance crews, food delivery people. I think, Andy, did you say there are 450 different employees in the system?
Yeah, over 300 at the last counting.
Okay, so obviously there's 300 to 450. There are a lot of different agencies and employees in the system. Next up, we've got MB, and just represented from the MIQ leadership team. So I'd like to welcome Christina Sophocles-Jones. If you'd like to come up here, please.
Nearly nailed it, Matt.
Thank you.
Like your name wrong. Oh, yes, right, that's all good. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be talking about my branch or Indian General, so get a mix. I'm the GM of National Operations Services. It's a very long title for someone with a very long name. And I made that myself because that's what we do in MIQ. And I joined in June, about 4 days after Megan, with a, do you want to go over and help? And I said, yeah, what will I be doing? So I think I've had what I've described as 3 roles in MIQ since then. I just don't know what the first one was. So we just started building. I think we thought at that time we'd have 3 months to transition, and then it was 2 weeks. So basically it went from transition and establishment to just build it. And it started for me anyway with helping build the exceptions function, which had a very big pause in people being able to apply, and then a very big influx in applications for a very new team. I love the idea that fees came in October up there. I wasn't here for the session, it was August. So we had 2 weeks to do that, which was really interesting. It's probably these right years. And then the allocation system. So I think a key date for me that's missing up there is when that system went mandatory in November, which happened to coincide with a huge spike in demand to come into New Zealand, quite scary days. And we probably built an emergency allocation function in about 3 hours, which was just stupid. And it was really just life and limb, imminent death. That's the only reason that you can come in the country. So that was a pretty fraught month until we could expand those categories out to something a bit more forgiving.
So I know, me and Debbie at the time had to struggle with those decisions for people coming in. And since then, obviously, we've just kept building, and I think the leadership team this year are in a focus of still building but really improving. So we've got really good people around. I don't know if Kara's, yeah. So we've got a big policy team. I know we get questioned about that, but my goodness, I don't know what we do if we didn't have them. They are so key for all of us. And I will say a plug for them is I've never worked with a more operationally focused policy team. I've trained them now. It's really key that they do get us in the room and we really do have input, and we try and get input from each of these agencies and areas to the really key things. Sometimes we don't have an opportunity to do that, and sometimes, as Megan said earlier, we do get some decisions back that none of us really thought were even on the table. So we just have to work with those, and I think we can always improve our communication about why those things have happened as well in a very, how should we say, OIA-focused way. And we've got a progress and change team without whom we wouldn't be able to do all of the improvements that we're trying to do now to the returning experience for our workers, for our systems and processes, which we're always trying to evolve and improve. We've got Giles, Giles? You're a new data and technology GM, which is very exciting for me because I've been banging on his door about some of the things that we can do in terms of our case management system. And obviously we've still got some technology improvements we can make in the allocation system as well, which is ever evolving from a simple booking system into a better booking system into a planning system. And so in my area, we are certainly looking at and transitioning to now more fully a national planning model, which will really help us to have a further out picture of demand, how we can get people into facilities quicker and better. And I think those are really key things to do to make sure our returnees aren't sitting on buses any longer than they need to, checking into hotels for any longer than they need to, hopefully to help, health workforce to roster earlier, buses planned out earlier, all of that good stuff that we're working with. And thanks to those of you who've been involved in those workshops today, it's been really, really useful to have your contributions. And obviously we've got Tess, key voice around the leadership team table for us. She keeps us honest. We've also got Shane's team, service quality and assurance, and they really are in the background there, working on risk, how do we make the system more robust, how do we look after our teams and our returnees, and looking at the pastoral care strategies and other things that are going to really help us to shift our game. We've got obviously our new director, Molly, great, and Megan's got an office as well, Office of the Deputy Secretary, who do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that no one really appreciates, I don't think, as really there's a lot of stuff going on there, and trying to structure us into things like business plans and strategies and things which we haven't really had, which feel like a bit of a luxury at times, but it's really important that we do that stuff to keep us focused. Andy's also here. He told me this morning that he just did his lunches and coffees. No, Andy, obviously our associate GC. So he is now looking to the future. He's building a team that will have, as Ashley said yesterday, the dedicated time and focus and space to look at the future. And we know we need to do that. There's a lot of good stuff that came out of the international conversations yesterday that we can learn from, and we can, go forward and change ourselves and maybe hopefully get that step ahead of the game. So.
Great. Thank you. Next up is health. And I recognise we've got all the DHBs in the room represented. We've got the public health units involved, of course, and I guess we had the DHBs present yesterday, so I've asked Shona to come and talk to us from the ministry's perspective today. And look, one thing I've learned over this, when I started this, hadn't anything to do with the health sector at all, and I just expected that the Ministry of Health made the policy and the DHBs just went away and did it. They worked the same way, and if they're unsure, the Ministry would just tell them what to do. I've learned that's not quite the way, but I can really say on behalf of the category anyway that we work really closely with the DHB colleagues, so we work in partnership. And we solve problems together, we learn together, and we couldn't do this individually, any of us. So this is my shout out to the health sector. Shona, over to you to talk about the ministry and how you've been involved right from day one yourself. Thank you.
Sure, some of my I guess is important first listeners is the difference between the Ministry of Health and District Health Boards. We're not the same, and I think my DHB colleagues wouldn't want to mix that with the Ministry of Health. And I also did have a laugh about they're not talking about the difference between, people didn't know what the difference between quarantine and isolation is, and it turned out neither does the Ministry of Health, because they've got them around the wrong way. They're stuck now, so. The role of the ministries has changed quite a lot over the last year, so I joined in June last year too, and up to that point, I think one of those good ladies might be Aileen at the park, who was doing a phenomenal job, kind of especially delivering services. So we had Europe and others from the Ministry of Health in Auckland delivering services, and that transition through to our northern region partners in July last year, I think. But we've kind of shifted from the initial response to having to get things up and running very quickly and work out, you know, is 14 days right? So yeah, we'll give that a go. And as you think, kind of evolves to listen to review about what the protections are. So the ministry leads the public health reform, which MIQ is a key kind of leader in that public health reform. And we've talked yesterday about the Keep It Out strategy. Our team in the ministry for MIQ, I like to think of us as the bridge, sometimes with the meat and the sandwich, I guess, between policy and our operations, and kind of how we try and communicate, and Christina touched on it, around the operational implications of some of the policy that we want to set from a public health perspective. So our team is kind of responsible for working with our district health board colleagues to try and translate that policy into something that can be operationalised on the ground, with probably varied success and varied time to give our colleagues to implement. So just appreciate and acknowledge that we often ask you all to do things at short notice. Really appreciate that. And the other part of the ministry I think is important to talk about is our technology and digital team, who created the national border system, the national clinical management system for the border, and so it's a little bit aligned to the border worker testing register. And I think we would all be really struggling if they hadn't kind of seen how the waterway kind of early part of last year to go, we're going to need these systems to be able to manage the returnees coming in. And now, and I'm really hopeful kind of with the clinical management system now we've been able to ease on the burden to our staff on the ground by automating a little bit more of what we do. The other piece we do is around infection prevention and control, so providing that ongoing advice as we kind of learn more about the virus, and working with our IPC leads across the country to determine what the policy needs to be. And then we, the team that goes out and does the audits, independent audits, to make sure that we're complying with that policy. I sit as part of the MBLT, so I'm trying to keep us working together and make sure that health voice is represented in the leadership team. And then probably lastly, it's just important to recognise kind of my wider colleagues in the MIQ system. So we've got a testing team that's kind of accountable for making sure the labs and the testing can all be delivered within MIQ and returned on a timely way. Got the vaccination programme that's rolling out and to kick off with the border workers. Our contact tracing team, so they every day they're doing contact tracing through our cases within MIQ and looking at where people have gone through their airports and tracking back people they're sat next to on the planes. And then we've got the science and intel team who are kind of working to look at what we're doing around the world on this virus and what that might mean for our MIQ processes, and equally who are allowing into the country. So you'll just know some of the categorisations of very high risk countries. And get issues around that. So this is what for the Ministry of Health.
Thank you. And just before I ask Eddie to come up and talk from an NZDF perspective, I just want to recognise also and acknowledge the great work that the emergency services do. We've got the police, of course, present in every facility and working in Wellington. And I'm not sure if we've got anybody from the police here. You have? Oh, sorry. That's really easy. Do you want to come down a few words? No, that's all right. I'm not going to put you on the spot. But you're more than welcome to. Okay, perhaps I'll get them up and then we'll get from the police and also Fins. Anybody from Fins? No. Look, Fins have been invaluable for us, making sure their facilities are safe, their staff know how to respond in emergencies, and that we keep things compliant. So they're not here today, of course. So anyway, over to Adam to talk about the NZDF perspective. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I basically received the same brief as Christine, so my little spiel might be a combination of talking about the role of the NZDF and general musings from my point of view. So it looks like I'm leaning on a bar with a drink in my hand. That's when I'm going from the role of the NZDF to my general musings. So to put things into perspective, so Adam Gordon at the Auckland Rick, good intro to start with. My involvement with the whole process, or with MIQ, started at the end of last year. But with a lot of you in the room, my involvement with the whole process in response to COVID started before then. My previous job, I was the Joint Force Headquarters out of Trentham, and my role was in charge of international training and engagement activities. So as you can imagine, come around about February and so forth, when international travel got turned off, my job description went from clocking up frequent flyer miles to throwing a tennis ball against the wall. So, but I was in part of that capacity. We were looking at the training model and so forth, looking at people and what they'd be required to do as they went in. So just looking at the NZDF, I guess as one of the organisations excluding the police, we're one of the most clearly identifiable by our sharp proof teams on the site. And aside from the various leadership roles we have, be it here in MIQ, at the RIC level, and down obviously on the ministers themselves, most of the roles we have are in the ops position. But we also have people filling logistics and admin, as well as planning functions as well. So we're pretty much infused throughout the whole MIQ apparatus there. Probably best under questioning, better tap dancing than ill prepared. So, but if there's some questions about NZDF, I can talk about that. But if we move on to my musings, I'd say more than anything, and really it's looking at the evolution of our response and NZDF's role in that there. So very convenient that Mel put all the timeline up on the wall there. NZDF's involvement and indeed the whole nation's involvement really started, and it has evolved a lot there, from a Mercy Dash with an RNZAF Boeing into Wuhan, camper vans out at Tamaki Leadership Centre and Whamapara, to now what we're doing where we're handing over leadership roles in the RIC as we have in Auckland to NB employed civilians. So, and a lot of that there really comes from the NZDF, where we've really been mission focused, getting the job done. And I know we've talked. She wants to talk a lot about. I 100% agree with. We went from crisis response to critical incident management all the way through now to a business as usual. So we've moved away from a focus of do we need to do to get the job done and keep New Zealand safe. Not fixating too much on the how, as long as the results are. Acknowledging there's still parameters that we need to keep that within. And now that we're now looking at making sure the business is the best business model that we're going forward. Without sounding like a bump stick, that change is inevitable, but it's managing that change that's been quite critical to us here. And we would have seen the speed of change, and we've seen on multiple slides how that change has been a pain for a lot of organisations here. But it is necessary, but sometimes we just need to take a pause to ensure that those changes, we give them a chance to actually get in and see if they're useful change. Moving on to that's kind of the process. The other thing I want to talk about the people, and unfortunately, Shah had a fantastic session, which basically killed all the conversations about merging of cultures and so forth. So I can kind of just skip through all that there. But the key thing is, as a lot of us have come into this role, it's very different to day jobs, probably excluding the health and but even the hotel staff. Yes, they're running a hotel, but the hotel's now a facility, so there's different parameters. Every week when we get new managers in, we reiterate the mission to them, but we also give them the understanding that we acknowledge this is not what they joined their service. So we've got pilots who are now managing not a cockpit of an aircraft, but an isolation facility. We've got ship drivers who are doing likewise. We've got army logistics and so forth. So it's really important to note that people they have that desire to serve, but they're obviously going way outside of their lane and just using best practices of the sport and getting throughout the various layers. I do always comment on the fact that you know, it's a challenging but also a rewarding experience, and ensure that everyone when they go into that lift, you know, be it if they're in management or down to just doing some of the less visible role, that each part that they play is critical to you know, protecting New Zealand against this threat. I would think have something quickly in there about you know, various quotes that really do hammer home what the people here do. I can break out of Winston Churchill commented out, you know, never had so many, you know, owe so much to so few, and that's quite accurate to the people that are in the MIS, in the RICS coordinating, and obviously in the MIQ here in Wellington, providing that there. I simplified it because I'm a more simple person. You know, in the Auckland RIC, my little kind of tagline is "We make bad things good," because that's about as honest as I guess I can come up with. But look, that's kind of all I've got. I'm happy to hand over and we can answer some questions.
Thank you.
Just please, how much on the police? Of course, played a valuable part when I started this. Mike Bush was in charge and driving it from PNHQ, and I don't know if you've been here for that since that time. You have? Yes. Great. Some good stories to tell.
That's probably the most hasty
Sorry.
things noticing, but yeah, my involvement started pretty much on the day that the whole thing broke out, but not because Nick wasn't around at the time that the code actually became a thing. My job initially was on a district basis, essentially involved around, you remember when we had to do the isolation visits. So the idea was that everyone back into New Zealand from abroad had to be subject to home visits. Well, that's all the Prime Minister told everybody what's happening. We didn't get the memo on that one. We've been making phone calls 3 or 4 times a day to people, and basically, if they said it at home, occasionally we may get them park outside their house to make sure that, you know, it's away from the windows and things. That was as good as it got in terms of ensuring compliance around that. So Prime Minister appeared, I think on one of the reasons that the home was taking place. My job then increased about 1,000-fold because I thought they got national visits to thousands of people that have since arrived in New Zealand and needed service to home. Then we had the whole thing of the stickering campaigns that you know, the army camp, and so gradually the police role have evolved and pretty much not evolved with it as an individual as well as professionally, because some quite interesting things that have happened over the last 14 months or so. So obviously we then have the level 4 scenario. So as well as the home visits and everything else, we then had to enforce the lockdown. So of course my role became 3 or 4-fold. One of the benefits of the national lockdown is, of course, that people stuck at home didn't commit crime. So for me, it was made a little bit easier because resources were freed up quite significantly because they weren't responding to emergency calls. Probably the only part of our business that did increase, apart from the importance of the lockdown, was family harm issues. And of course, there's always that we still didn't know what we didn't know about COVID. So even at symptoms, when we faced comments, everyone was worried about who's got what and who's potentially going to get what to move. So it all get a little bit murky. And then when Nick finally got settled in Auckland, one of the issues for us was what's the police role in terms of me. We were quite happy to provide, provide good service. One response vehicle, and I think it was next to the time we were looking at that. And so the way we deployed to incidents in facilities was the MIF manager would have a direct phone line to the supervisor in Auckland, and the supervisor would then decide who actually attended to the incident. clearly that wasn't a sustainable model. We thought it was. And then Auckland went back into road checks, lockdowns. So again, I will expand it to checkpoints operation where we are. I'm military guys will be aware of that. That's what happens. So we've got 4 or 5 different elements to a police response, none of which we expected from day one. So at that point, once we had the road checks, we had to split our operations. So the road policing side of things was dealt with down at our police mission headquarters down here in Wellington. And my role then became specific to MIQ. And at about the same time, there was a request put through that perhaps we should be a little bit more present at the facilities, which I think our executive would probably be comfortable in saying that initially they pushed back, saying that, this is not really a good use of resources, because currently we've got about 235 police staff dotted around the country and all the mix. Having said that, we were very clear in terms of what it was that we were going to be doing, and we were not going to be security guards. That was one of the very, very firm directives from our executive. That was fair enough because it's not security on site. So we made it clear, our executive made it clear that yeah, we will engage, we'll provide some enforcement presence, but that will be purely a reassurance or enforcement capacity. And that's pretty much where we're at now. And we like to think we've had a contribution in terms of the we had quite a number of escapes, which led up to the request agreed to me to throw us in this. Those escapes went from successful to threats and attempts once the police arrived. I'm not sure we necessarily had a huge amount to do with that. It was just it was more of a putting together of minds in terms of how we actually protect people from that, not just the police and other approaches, processes and exchange. So yeah, so we went 24/7. And things have actually gone okay for us since. We're there for reassurance, we make it very clear, and we couldn't have done it without the help of all the other agencies. So because you're already embedded before the police actually arrived. So without the help of your agencies and your individuals gave the police, I think that's what we're successful to have. So for me, it's been a journey, and certainly for an organisation, or as an organisation, it's been a huge journey for us in terms of perhaps not recognising where we could impact and influence, and hopefully we've done it successfully as a collective. So from me, thanks to everybody that's here for helping us to gradually embed into the process, and yeah, long may it continue because it's a great role for everyone. I think. Awesome.
Right, and that sort of wraps up that part of the session. Thank you, speakers. And I think the real thing coming through is around the collaboration and everybody working together in this environment. And Megan has got up here a first draft of the sort of purpose statement, a one page that outlines the purpose and the intent of MIQ. And if you get the opportunity over the next couple of hours, if you can have a look at that, and any feedback would be welcome. And I think we'll probably be sending that out to the group after this as well.
Can you suggest getting rid of the photos?
Yeah. So I'll just hand over to Simon, and the next part of the session is about my director, and I'll let him explain that. Thank you.
That's the MI2 version, not the MI3 with Limp Biscuit. Welcome to Mission Impossible Quarantine. That's what I thought it was for a long time. My name is Simon Russell. Christine and Megan asked me to come and help out and how can we optimize MIQ. When I started working with Christina, she said, look, we'll give you a day role, manager operations planning. And I come from the acronym world, so that was MOPS, and it's subsequently changed to National Accommodation Planning, which is NAT, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Moving on from the acronym world, who's heard of VUCA? VUCA. Anyone from the military, etc., has heard of that. Coined in 1987 by Warren Bennis with his work with the US Army War College. A volatile, uncertain, complexity, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think that's the state of everything I heard yesterday and this morning. And so this is your question. We've got 55 minutes. We're going to keep the time. 10 minutes per question. There's 3 questions. At your tables in your groups was A1 paper folded in half. So first question, so 10 minutes. At the end of it, we'll get a 30 to 60 second feedback from the table on the key things that your groups come up with on the question. So this is about strategic leadership, the future of MIQ, building on the vision and mission purpose that being mentioned before. So the first question at your table, what can we reasonably expect or anticipate to happen and need to respond to in the future? This is environment, what, where, when. So what can we reasonably expect or anticipate to happen and need to respond to? So 10 minutes. Thank you.
I think I might have changed up. One of the effects of there's different zones. But we've also got the so that's where different sections of regulations. So like this so countries move out of the virus to the low risk areas. That's what we I also wanted to see
Over in the book.
Yes. Yes. And is there a question from you know, the other one that it'll be an error. So,
Okay, a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap up.
yeah, we agree.
Okay, 3 seconds. Thanks, everybody. So I'm sure there's some fantastic thoughts around the tables. Perhaps we could just move around the table and we'll start with Sean, your table over here. We'll just get your feedback. 30 seconds, 30 to 50 seconds. Some of your thoughts. At the end of the session, we'll collect up all the sheets and then on to the next page. If you could use I think it's two sheets of A1 if you wanted to divide it in half for the next session, and we'll collect up these, and we'll use the back if that works for you. So, Sean's take.
We've got 5 or 6 points. Some replicate from yesterday, the challenges with climate change, increasing complexity in response to how the pandemic progresses, to some of Susie's points last night, the prevalence of variants, the effect of vaccination on transmission rate, etc. The increased push for economic recovery and how borders support that, so how people decide to travel to New Zealand or not because of the way in which MIQ is managed in the future. The role of MIQ in responding to community outbreaks, ongoing discussion of future state and purpose-built facilities, question mark. What's the long-term sustainable MIQ system look like? What actually do? The emerging evidence and the need to respond and adapt. Susie made a really poignant remark last night around I'll talk to that journalist because I don't want him or her to talk to someone else. So the divergence of view as the variants emerge, so does the science. Sustainability of the workforce, attracting a workforce to MIQ into the future, what does that look like? We know what customs looks like, we know what other agencies look like. And I think the last, I'll repeat that one already, that's it from us, thanks.
The next.
Guarantee things will change.
Did I say that way?
Complexity is going up, demand is going up, the length of stay potentially some will reduce for the low risk, so potentially some sort of self-isolation option, but the high risk potentially longer. Community outbreak will Aussie infect us, and will we infect the Pacific? And is it going to be in hotels long term? And you can guarantee workforce fatigue.
Thank you.
Cool. Kia ora tātou. Just touching on the one point there brought up by Steve over here about withdrawals of agencies from obviously our whole managed isolation and quarantine program, and we're obviously hoping to minimise all our myths, preferably starting with Waikato first. Enjoy all our hotels, take it possible, wink. And also how would these vaccine passports work in order to putting that into the country as well, because it's quite good. Cool.
Good everyone. We've covered a bunch of the same ones: home isolation, stroke detention, as we saw from Singapore yesterday. The risk-based approach for nuances, so how we then approach community cases, the mix of styles and then specific communications, specific communities affected. Natural disasters, both regionally, globally, and domestically, and again, some of the people in the room disappearing want to do that as well. Another crisis for the government to manage and respond to, maybe another sort of March 15th or some greater political side. Downsides in the MIQ itself, so now that we're running it as business as usual, do they want to either reduce the amount of people in it or maybe transition to a different fort and start all over again at the workforce type thing? The adaptability of the workforce and maritime border changes, especially probably looking again coming into the 2021-22 boat season, the small boat season, like we saw that German one that came through in around about October time, so they'll probably try that again, because again, we're looking at, we all know this is going to be about 5 years from what everyone said yesterday, and everyone's probably thinking we can come south again next time it gets stormy up in the Pacific.
So we had a lot of the same that everyone else has already talked about. So the other things that we didn't mention about as much, we've got a lot about complexity with all of the change going on, but in particular, the impact on the community and the pressure to open up borders, the push for everyone wanting to travel internationally again, and potentially the public's overconfidence in the impact of vaccines. So, you know, they're vaccinated, so they're free to do what they want. And also coming back to it's going to be here for a long time. So actually, if we open up, then New Zealand will get used to living with COVID in the community, and then population COVID fatigue, and how that will also potentially impact on the trust and confidence in MIQ and public health. And then the other bits we had were taking the F out of MIQF and different models there. Public health, saying it's already sexy, keeping it sexy and funded to stay sexy. And then, yeah, that going on longer term and with austerity, make sure there's funding. And then, anticipating whatever demand fluctuations there are, because as we can see, it can flip very quickly.
Thank you. I guess it's a bit of a thing with ours, which is around change. So what we can expect over the next year or so is constant change. Need for us to be agile and help manage the MIQ operation. Changes in the location of the population potentially. A refinement or a stratification of the risk and the immigration status of people. Perhaps we want to be about how long people can afford where they go. Changes potentially to the testing methods, modalities. Maybe this is next slide, test approved, potentially make it easier for our people. More use of technology in the managed isolation facilities. Potentially, so take away. So review of the MIQ system as a sustainable in the future in its current model. I guess we've got to be able to look at that at some point. Length of stay, location, and workforce strategy that goes along with that. A constant for us is going to be medium level scrutiny. Need to be working for it. One big one that has come in is changing the public health system. That will be kicking off in around about a year's time with the introduction of legislation. Migration intelligence, where are the people of the future for our east going to come out there? What does that shape looking like? What do they bring with them in the different ways, through different areas? And overall, I guess as that constant change is our new norm, and we've got to make sure we can work with them.
Most of them have already been said, but we talked about hotels wanting to opt out of MIQ. Tourism seems more appealing. We will see some more in the transmission, unfortunately. Community perception of people from safe and unsafe countries. That goes along with the thought that with the global situation we've seen, we will see more very high risk countries. And also balancing the returnees' rights and the ability to keep the country safe. We heard yesterday from the Australia, UK and Singapore very different ways of dealing with their returnees, so I think we may have to start thinking about that.
Okay, Julia. So, thank you very much. That was great. What we'll do is collect all the things at the end of the session, because you might be using the other side of the sheet. So the second question, a broad question again, have we got the right mix of capabilities to respond to this volatile, uncertain, changing, complex world? And have we got the right mix of agencies and partners? Is more input or extra capability required? So I'll give you 8 minutes for this one. And I'd like to snap that in group. Thank you.
Yes. NZDF allocations, systems and so it becomes completely. Next year. Yeah, and how yeah, but it's about, it's interesting, like, I respond to this one right there, this is one of the being kind of a team, and you have to bring people in who are just doing at least it's not to be it. Which we're doing, and it's getting
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, another minute to go. If you could leave your course to the other. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, thank you. We'll start from the table at the front here. We'll just move around the room. 30 to 60-second feedback. Thank you.
Okay, we feel that it is actually a conversation about the agencies who respond. It's about capability of the response and where we get that from. And one of the conversations we've had is about actually putting all this capability into one agency in some way, shape or form. God forbid my health colleagues in the room would include in health. And also tying in with that is what is going to happen following our health report. So at the moment we've got health under 5 DHBs working in 5 different regions. Come July next year when these health reports start rolling out, how's that going to be affected? And also there's a conflict at the moment in health with MIQ, border operations that have to do with quarantine-free travel, vaccination, and where do we get that workforce from as we're heading into winter and the normal pressures of winter in health. And again, I think that translates through to the NZDF and where they sit in amongst this long term, and are some of the roles that they're doing can they be done by other people, maybe under a single structure. Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
So we put down data fusion valve, that was what we called it, but I think it's more around a collection of data from all agencies and being able to for everyone to be able to see that. We put down public and private partnership. And then another area is like we look at the capacity that we've had in our hotels that has been up, as we Australian counterpart, that we're looking at opening the border. Just I think we've got the right people here, but in terms of where maybe we might be more focused, and we don't. What I've noticed is we don't have MSD here, and so maybe the social impact there. So, and have we got the same consistency across the region in terms of social partners, mental health, and regulators?
Right. Excellent.
Slightly off track, the question is about the right mix, or is it the right mix and balance?
in terms of particularly noting, for whatever reason, public health really light in the forum for whatever reason, and yet they have such a central role in this whole business and will continue to after MIQF's assessed fee. And the other was questioning whether we have the right or best or any functional governance structures in place at the level that they need as opposed to the operational.
Thank you. Everyone talks about NZDF, so I'll not do that one. The delegated board of workforce is one that keeps coming up, but I think now that we've looked at the 5-year potential, that's maybe it's nice to look at sort of. I would imagine everyone in this room had a day job before COVID, and that's not happening or is happening at a very snail's pace. So maybe we need to create some workforce that everyone can focus on the border and focus on looking after Aotearoa while there's the massive piling up of emails of business as usual. Different contracts, different requirements, who's responsible, who's going to do more vaccinations, because we're already talking about the efficacy of the vaccine. We would have to do that booster in a while. We should probably be planning that now, and here we're not, because all the people we have got are doing the current stuff. And one we haven't said yet is looking at the private sector, because certainly to use the military sort of metaphor here, we always trying to fight the last war, not the next one. And so with the government side of it, if we have the private sector and a lot of innovation and money going in there, maybe we can find new technology, good ways to try and prevent this in the future or reduce the impact now.
We started our conversation by asking what are we responding to, because the models are changing and the world picture is changing so greatly. And we touched a little bit on what you were saying around strategic planning. We're going from a hero state to a steady state, if you like. And at the moment, we don't have that planning strategy in place. We also talked about the differing cohorts of returnees and who decides who takes priority. Will we move to regional and industry mix? For example, our agriculture and construction sectors wanting more workers to come in. And how are we measuring success to know if we need to change?
Right.
So we have the top one.
Right, Defence Force close your ears. The question that we posed was, does it have to be defence or police or any agency of that nature to actually run a myth? The question was, can the hotel industry actually potentially be used to do that? So I think essentially we're in a control and command environment. The way we currently operate is not the right model. So who actually has the right to control? And one of the issues I think we're all aware of that the Ombudsman regularly visits, and one of the commentary I read was something to the effect that we need to treat people who are returnees as though they are effectively detainees. So they can go nowhere, but there are certain limitations on what we can do to prevent them doing what a lot of them want to do, which is get out. So NZDF police, there's the uniform contingent, but is that which is a good question. And really, again, the uniform side of the business, what exactly is it there for? We see it as reassurance. We talked also about, there was one of the health orders talked about introducing enforcement officers. I'm actually sure we've reached the point yet where the notice that we would use to enforce, i.e. the infringement notice, I don't think that's actually been designed or created yet. So it's no criticism, it's just that we sort of, events sort of overtook us in that regard. So at the end of the day, do we have the right mix? We probably do currently, but I'm not sure in 12 months' time we'll probably be sitting looking back at what we currently have.
I think we probably talked about a lot of those same things as well. I'm talking about, as the system changes and evolves and expands its scope, having to rethink about what the mix of capability and partner agencies we need to be. I think we talked
a lot about the fact that we heard some great stories, particularly yesterday from Waikato and Rotorua about the work that Mana Whenua do, but that isn't necessarily represented across the whole system, and so there's a need and opportunity to engage with our Māori and Pacific community and service providers at all levels of the system, including at the policy and strategic level. And then also thinking beyond capabilities, also capacity, and thinking about how we can ensure that there's sort of surge capability as well, or capacity within the system, so that, especially around workforce, that it's a sustainable system moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on the last 15 minutes, and then the reward is a coffee and a quick break at the end before Tess comes up and gets off this afternoon. So the third question today, a great term, keep, stop, start. What should we be doing, not doing as we move forward? And maybe there's 3 columns on your page or 3 rows, keep, stop, start. And so I'll give you 7 minutes to do that. Thank you.
Can I put down start? I'm trying to think we got this, but there's just things that can really we general practices and then one that we can also change we have a process for educating everybody actually. So to me, a little bit actually, when you educate, orientation is but then a modified. Yeah. No, yes, the so you have all that information. No, it's this.
Something kind of team last year. I looked at it. I just had to switch it on. So and it's airing the because it's doing this, which we're just yeah, 3 o'clock. 3, yeah, but that's
Okay, thank you, everybody. Then we'll start from the side of the room. Let's work around the table. Thank you. This is 30 to 60 seconds.
Right, on the keep side of things, keep collaborating. Right now? Yeah, so keep collaborating, this cross-agency thing, we're going to keep that going. So that's a good thing. There's a comment about keep optimising the built environment to keep people safe. Well, that's a really flash way of saying how do we make the best out of the facilities that we have, or have we got kind of got the right facilities at the moment? If not, let's get the right ones in place going forward, knowing anything specific or bespoke or purpose-built doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It happens over a period of time. From a stop perspective, we've got stop mentioning hotel names publicly. Where's the record? You're making on that, I imagine. I'm going to just do a little personal barrier that I'm pushing. Very first time I come into MIQ, I was going, they are not hotels. Stop calling them guests. They are managed isolation facilities, and they're not guests, because we heard yesterday there's a whole bunch of connotation when you start calling them hotels, and the demeanour and the expectation of individuals both working there and using the service on the way through. So let's be clear about that. They're not hotels at the moment, they're managed isolation facilities. Would be really great if we could stop podium policy announcements. We thought that was a good one. And stop using the F-bomb. We've heard that a lot of late, and that's failure, not the other one. Christina, I saw that look in the bus. From the start one, start assessing home isolation future state options now, please. In terms of think about that, what's the tools in the toolkit? Yeah. Strengthening our processes for communicating and implementing changes in policy and guidance. In other words, we've got to really think about if there are changes coming, we've got to give ourselves a break to be able to ensure that we can effectively implement them, not do it apply at the last minute, and are they going to be effective? So we've got to think about our cycle change in terms of how we're going to be successful to be able to do that. Easier to say, harder to do given the environment, but you know that's one of the things we've got to stop our people scrambling all the time, and you know the stress and the opportunity for mistakes to occur happen under such pressurised environment, and we're kind of not in that environment where we want that to be the default position, right? Want to keep everyone safe. Another one that's not written here, but I was talking about it when we come through, another personal barrier of mine that I was talking about, as we heard it around the place, given I look after the risk and insurance and that sort of thing, yeah. I'm really keen about standardisation wherever practicable with norm where appropriate, because that gives us strength in terms of risk and control management. It gives us the ability to be able to adapt more readily because we're changing it once, applying it multiple times with norms rather than apply something and do 32 variations around the place to be able to get it. Gives us speed and strength, yeah. So it is a maturity thing, but that's something that I'm keen to think about. It also helps reduce impact on human factors. Yeah, really big thing around that. So that's something I think we need to think about ensuring in terms of developing our SOPs and our other procedures and building the assurance into the way that work is done, not think about assurance as an afterthought going forward.
Yeah, so I'm going to controversially start with the stops because then we can end on the keeps, which are really warm and fuzzy. So the stops were stop rotating bid managers, surprise, stop in media negative stories and I guess the stars, the positive ones. Rather controversial, stop doing failure investigations, but I think that's more about the framing of this and the approach to it rather than not finding out what's going on. And stop the MIQ Facebook page. The starts, ask people on the ground for information, so I think that's more about collaboration. It'd be really lovely to have longer rollout times and time to test things, if we're talking to our minister. Regional sharing, as we heard you say, lots of great ideas in the regions and a lot of willingness to adopt those in other places, and about that best practice. Start doing a regular review of our meetings, who's attending and do we have the right people around the table. Start or continue growing the wellness and welfare of our staff. And starting and growing community awareness of MIQ, demystifying it. It was a great idea to have a soap or reality TV station. We don't blame on a name, but maybe instead of Police Team 7, we could be MIQ 24/7. Yeah, I'm going to train like that. And in terms of the keep, we want to keep supporting others in MIQ. We want to keep acknowledging our teams, and we want to keep doing days like this.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, I immediately put down that we should keep NZDF command and control, and I was immediately shot down by my group, so it's now the stop paragraph. Definitely keep the wider cultural aspect, there's a huge benefit that we can grow on, so we still put that across to the start and to EV engagement, but extend it out more to the other nations that we're dealing with as well. So find out what works for them and work for that. And obviously we're going to keep the workforce experience. We don't know how, we don't know, what we need to incentivise people to stay a bit longer, but definitely. Under stop, we've got to stop this reactionary model that we have. We can't just sort of, what's today's crisis look like? We need more contingency planning. We need to know that if this happens, then go to this SOP, and there'll be a checklist to sort of work your way through. Quite a few stats. We love electronic monitoring, microchips, things that are unique or whatever. Definitely more strategic planning. We've got to keep looking to the future. I know we have planning sections that we do upstairs, obviously, but we've got to sort of tease that out a bit more and try and get ahead of the game as much as we can. And the last one I quite like is probably a bit more directed control. Although we like to have a nationwide or national influence from here, we still need to give them enough power to do their job there. And so Joel's talked about the tight, loose, tight model. I love it. Thank you.
I think a lot of it's been said already, but I think the best thing is to keeping our Aotearoa safe, and keep doing that, keep being kind, keep valuing our workforce, and sort of that agility, safety versus returning needs, just keeping agile on that front. We want to stop the negative stuff. I think most people have spoken about that, and just ensuring that there is a learning culture, just stop that blame stuff. I think some of the start things that haven't been mentioned, just in the last few minutes, is just that relationship with the social side, multi-agency planning, and we really talk about start acting as one team, an MIQ team rather than individual agencies, and that positive comments.
So, one of the keeps, a lot of these have been said as well, but we want to keep the collaboration between the different agency groups, keep the partnerships, the local innovation, and keep the people at the centre of what we're doing. Stocks, we want to stop the dedicated workforce requirement for health. I really need them to be able to work in other clinical settings. Stop the multifaceted reviews and allow these to be more streamlined, and stop the stigma. And the starts, recruiting for the projected workforce deficit that is going to come, the exit strategy, what's going to happen post MIQ, operational impact assessment into policy papers, e.g. saliva testing, let's get some feedback, recruiting more IPC specialists and experts, prioritising focus reviews, proactive comms externally, and start talking to health about what they're already doing to support community isolation.
A stop for us was a stop the us versus them. We've heard it a lot in the last couple of days, and just NZDF on the losing side of that wicket. But we don't need that in our own team. Silos, whether we'll put that in a national piece. So we can't afford to have our leadership teams just keeping stuff to themselves, silo information. It's still the team that needs to know, so we need to communicate this to them. They don't work in silos. We keep our core systems, that's basically our testing, our IPC, those things that work, and they continue to work. We just need to make sure we maintain with that the continuous improvement mindset. Now we must keep continuing and celebrating success. It's been said enough. We've heard some good examples over the last few days, but it's now about taking that next level and getting that out in a wider representation. Keep developing our MIQ culture. There was a good session earlier about that stuff, so there were some good pieces of that, and that then folded into, as part of the culture piece, our just culture. So it's easy from an NZDF lens, we teach people to hide in the corner when we get told if you say it wrong. So we want to get rid of that. And the way we need that assurance to be improved in terms of insurance is we need to let our people tell the message and don't be afraid to tell a mistake. Keep sharing lessons, so that gives our consistency in our approach, what we do. Keep collaboration, and that sort of looks like making sure if there is change, whatever's going on, there's an urgent voice to that change. And that'll then help us communicate a unified purpose. Cheers.
Great, thanks, Owen.
Okay, bit cheesy, keep coded out. Keep evolving, constant review cycle, challenging ourselves, an open mind and avoiding resistance to change. Stop COVID getting in. Give us, stop giving us no notice to implement changes. Stop being reactive, stop chasing the ball. Start giving us implementation windows rather than just now. Of course, the changes at 1600 on a Friday.
start informing ground crew, or those who are on the shop floor, the coal face, whatever we like to call it, earlier of changes, including the reason behind the consequences. Start being proactive. Start getting some fresh eyes, educated fresh eyes. Good ideas, hope sometimes comes up with some stuff. So let's have those educated eyes. And let's start talking about what joins us as MIQ, not necessarily as the individual agencies. And we've got a name for your soap opera, it's MIQ 336, which is 24 to 14.
All right, thanks so much, everybody. Great session. Everything's being captured off the tables. Tess and the team will together, and I'll try to do it smart for together to do it for the Sunday afternoon on a Thursday. There's a short break, and then Tess will just round out the session. But I'd like to acknowledge all the agencies partners here. It's an absolute privilege to be here, and thank you to Tess and the team for a fantastic job they've done. Let's get mad. Grab a coffee, drink, rest up, and we'll see you back in. We're on 3 minutes in here, I'm on time. So back at 2:40.
Thank you. Fantastic. No. There are.
There are things that are just testing that one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said they'd figure that out, so we'll talk about that, but I'll check with Megan, but I don't mind just even putting it up and paying, I didn't get the chance to. Yeah, no, yeah, well, I could need, we could even. Yeah. Well, if you start before I get into mine. I don't know. Okay, okay. So I just wondered if you wanted to. Yeah, so it's going to be a hard one. Don't worry, it was just on your. So did you watch yeah, I've said I don't know.